Howdy Bible 12. All right, it's your independent work time, and this Ed puzzle is going to be for you. I'll pause at certain points to make sure that you answer questions and whatnot. So if you haven't done it already, make sure that you've already done the How Not to Zoom Ed puzzle. It's literally like a minute and a half, so it should be super quick. Do that and then do this. So we're going to talk about different types of love and whatnot. Now, in our little Zoom session, we talked about how it's really difficult to come up with a definition of love sometimes, or one that like catches everybody's experience of it. And here's why language falls short. We can either go with the symbolic, which is like the love, I love you with all my heart, or that sort of thing. But then we're using metaphor, which can sometimes be imprecise. And then on the flip side, if we want to be really precise about what's happening inside of us when we say that we love someone, we then default to like really scientific language, and we're like, I have increased amounts of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin in my body every time that my visual processing center of my brain processes the information of your body. That gets really like, that's not really actually representative of what we're feeling either when it comes to love. So um, language, no matter what, is going to fall short of transcendent experiences like love. And so it shouldn't surprise us that the English language is not a perfect tool. It does have some cool things about it. One is that um, it is able to clarify the differences between like and love. At least in English, we have those two things, like I like him or her, or I love him or her. I like that thing and I love that thing, which is an improvement from French, which only has aimé, and Spanish. I mean, Spanish has amar, and you can also use querer, but like even those two words are a little bit muddled together. And so English language has the pros of at least having two ways of expressing it, whereas the English language also doesn't have a way of distinguishing different grades of love. Once you're like, cool, I went from like to love, but then there's no further way of distinguishing there. So that's one of the cons of the English language. So if that's the case, like you can love ice cream, you can love your dogs, you can love your spouse, you can love your parents, you can love music, you can love brand new socks. All of those things can be loved. And there's no way linguistically that we can specify the difference in those types of love, which is why for a good chunk of this course, we are going to default to the Greek. Oh, it just repeats. That's funny. Okay, now we are going to get into like some of the different Greek types of love, but I want you to think, what should come first? Making a judgment about something, like if it's good or not, or understanding a thing? Now, if you think about it, like I think we do, oftentimes we start by the first thing. We have our own biases, we have our thoughts, we have our opinions, and so when we see a thing, we make a judgment about it. Like if it's your clothes, you're like, oh, and you're going shopping, trying to choose a shirt that you want to wear or not wear. Oftentimes, our first thing is to be like, do I like that or not? Not, I wonder what the person who created that garment desired for their initial outcome. Um, so, I mean, oftentimes we do judge before trying to understand a thing. But specifically when it comes to philosophy, it's really important that we understand a thing first before trying to make a judgment call about it. C.S. Lewis outlines these different types of love. He says we have the English like, which he is going to define as pleasure. There is the Greek storge, which is affection. There is philia, which is friendship. There is eros, which is romance. And there is agape, which is divine or gift love. And so we have these five things. And the reason I talk about making sure we don't judge them before understanding them is, like, especially at a Christian school, we might be like, cool, I know which one's the good one, agape. But it's important that we understand each of these types of love before trying to say which one's the best or the worst, right? So we are going to, and here's C.S. Lewis's explanation of that. Throughout this inquiry, we must be careful never to adopt prematurely a moral or evaluating attitude. The human mind is generally far more eager to praise and dispraise than to describe and define. It wants to make every distinction a distinction of value, and we are not going to do this intentionally. We are going to do our best to understand like, understand storge, understand philia, understand eros, and understand agape to the best of our abilities before having any sort of moral or evaluative attitude. Because how can you judge a thing that you don't understand? Now, before we get too far into this, it's really important that not only do we understand try to understand these different words, but it's also important to understand what words even mean. I pulled this meme up for a while ago. It's the Hey Girl meme, but Ryan Gosling, he's asking, what do you mean when you say, I love you? Because when you say I love you to someone, or even just using the word love, it could be interpreted a bunch of different ways, and you could mean it a bunch of different ways, right? The assignment, the exit ticket yesterday, you meant love a bunch of different ways when you wrote out those sentences. And so in communication, there are two different angles. When we use loaded words like love or like, one of our first impulses, especially in a Christian environment where we are wanting to what's the right thing to do? Sometimes it's easy to just be like, cool, let's make a new rule. Okay, don't say love in this scenario, say it in that scenario. Make sure that we have a good amount of love being said. Like in your threaded discussion for this week, talking about how often love is used. I mean, a lot of times students will be really judgmental of themselves and be like, oh, I really throw the word love around too much. I really should try to limit it. But I don't think legalism is the answer. And I don't Jesus seemed to indicate that as well, that the law or the righteousness of the Pharisees is not the type of righteousness we're after, right? We're after the righteousness of the kingdom. And so, I mean, when people are communicating, a word means what it means. Whether you know the Greek root of it or not, a word means what it means. Some people trace the roots of the word sincere to the Latin roots sincera, which means without wax. And they would say that because you could create if you were making like a marble bust and part of it broke, you could use wax to fix it, right? And then just color it like the rest of the rock. And so if someone wanted to have like a marble bust or a statue and say that it was genuine and there was no repairs needed, then you could be like, okay, well, it's without wax, which you could see how it's connected to sincere. But when I'm like saying, man, that guy's really sincere in his desire for this, or like, I'm being sincere with you right now, like, I'm not saying I'm being without wax, right? The etymology is secondary to what you understand when I say a word. And so priority one, when using loaded vocabulary like I love you, is priority one is be aware of yourself and what you feel and mean. So when you say I love you or I like you, be aware of what you mean in your mind when you say that, right? If you're not aware, if we aren't even aware of what we mean ourselves, then man, how much more difficult is it going to be for other people to know what we mean? So our priority one is be aware of yourself and what you mean when you say that thing. Priority two is to be aware of what others think you mean. Because you could be like, I love you to a person who you totally see as a friend, but they might love you. And so if you say, I love you to them, their heart might be soaring with butterflies in their stomachs, but you're just like, you're super cool. I enjoy hanging out with you. And so priority one and priority two is knowing what you mean and knowing what they mean, being considerate of the other person. And it's not only the word love that can be misinterpreted. There are gestures, there are words that you can say. I feel like I would have been saved so much heartbreak in high school had I had this conversation originally, and if I was willing to ask questions about what people meant, because what did that hug mean? Or what, when they say, I love you like a little brother, I got that one quite a bit, or I love you as a friend, or all of those types of things. It's kind of convoluted, right? Are they saying, I'm not interested in you? Which probably that's what's happening. Let's be real. Um, and so there's going to be a free response up for you. I just need you to answer what are some phrases or words or gestures, maybe even in text if it's emojis or things that a person can do that might get misinterpreted when it comes to love. So go ahead and answer that there. Now, this is an important tool, and it might seem like it's weird, but like I know that there's a little bit of room, especially in romantic relationships, for like learning each other and figuring things out, and you don't just like on the first date be like, "What are your intentions?" Um, but I do think that sometimes suffering gets multiplied because two people who may or may not like each other know that there's something like going on, but they're not willing to acknowledge it. And then I think that ends up multiplying suffering sometimes. So I feel like if you're caught in that trap where you're like, I don't know what they mean when they say this, or I don't know what they're trying to say to me, like just use this phrase. It's really easy. What do you mean by that? People use it in apologetics, but I think it's even valuable in relationships. Like when you say you could spend the rest of your life with me, like what do you mean by that? Because here's how I took it. Um, and then you can clarify things and hopefully get rid of unnecessary suffering if that's what's on the horizon for you. Um, cool. Like and love is what we're going to move on to next. Um, C.S. Lewis, he draws a line between these two words, just like because his book, The Four Loves, is kind of his philosophical take on these words. And so, for the sake of the philosophical discussion, he qualifies like as a love for the subhuman. He also says that sometimes when we say that we love a thing like ice cream or we love Once Upon a Time, the TV series, then we are saying that we like it to the max. It's the superlative form of like. So like and love are connected, but he does specify it. And for the purposes of this class, like means love of something that is non-human. Um, he says that it's descriptive of deriving pleasure from a non-human thing. And there are two main categories of this. One is need-like. Need-like are things that require desire or need, like a glass of water, and appreciative-like are things that are pleasures in their own right. Ice cream would fall under the category of need-like because, not that you need ice cream, but if you desire ice cream and you have ice cream, then you met that like desire or need in you and you no longer want ice cream. Once Upon a Time, the TV show, is not the same type of need. It's like a thing that's good in and of itself. It's a thing that's enjoyable or that you can like or love in and of itself, whether you feel a need for it or not. Oops. Um, Now, here are ways to tell if you have need or appreciative like. Need like tends to die. It dies once satisfaction is achieved. Um, the object is important because it brings pleasure to the receiver. And C.S. Lewis says that we tend to talk about it in past tense, like, wow, I really wanted that. Whereas appreciative, like, the thing deserves to be enjoyed because the thing itself is amazing. Whether or not I enjoy it, like, the thing, like, is a good thing. The object is important regardless of who's receiving the pleasure, right? Um, so like we say, wow, this is great coffee, or the Rembrandt's painting is absolutely breathtaking. It's not like I get hungry for looking at Rembrandt. It's just a beautiful thing, and then as a result, like I get pleasure out of it because it is a good thing. When you watch an opera, when you see an amazing movie, it's not like a need, but rather it's a thing that is good, and you experience it, and then it's wonderful, right? So, um, here we go. What kind of like is it? Is it need or appreciative? A painting. I'll pause a few seconds so you can guess. A painting is appreciative because it's good in and of itself. Fried foods is a need like, because not even though you don't need fried foods, that verbiage can get confusing. Fried foods are a need like because they die once you eat them. Like if you want fried zucchini from Grand Burger, which is delish, once you've eaten 3 pounds of it, you don't want it anymore, right? Whereas you don't get full of looking at a painting. Going to the bathroom is a need like because it only gives you pleasure when you have to go to the bathroom. And then once you've gone to the bathroom, you're not like, well, I could really do that again. Um, the smell of a field of sweet peas is appreciative because it's good and beautiful in and of itself. A heated blanket. Now, you don't need a heated blanket, but if it's 100 degrees outside, it's not going to give you pleasure. A heated blanket is only good when there is a need for it, right? When it's cold outside. Now, all these below are kind of a little trickier. Riding a roller coaster, I would say is appreciative, but Flamin' Hot Cheetos, good wine, a cup of coffee. Flamin' Hot Cheetos would be also a need because basically foods almost always qualify as need likes. But a good wine or a cup of coffee, if you are an alcoholic, then a good wine is a need like. If it's an expensive wine, and like wine tasting people, like they taste and often spit out the wine because it's about savoring and enjoying the flavor, then that would be appreciative. If you are like my friend Wayne Randolph, who loves delicious coffee and he can savor every last sip, then a cup of coffee can be appreciative. But if you're like me and you need coffee to function in the morning, then coffee is going to be more like a need like. All right, and there is one last type of like/love, and that is gift like. Because you can like or love a non-human thing because you need it or have a desire that you want to meet, or you can like or love a non-human thing because it's beautiful and it gives you pleasure, even like if you don't have necessarily a desire or need that you're trying to meet. And then the third type is gift like or love. And this is when there is a non-human thing that gives you pleasure to sacrifice for it. For example, if you were in the cold and you had the Mona Lisa there, if you were an art enthusiast, you would not cut the Mona Lisa out of the frame and use it as a blanket because it's a precious thing. You're willing to sacrifice your own comfort for it. You wouldn't dump a $500 bottle of wine on your leg if you have a scrape on your knee because that thing is too beautiful to want to waste it on cleaning out a knee scrape. And so these are things that people love that are non-human, that they're willing to sacrifice for. So like people who give time, money, and energy for nature preservation, that's gift-like because they love nature so much that they're willing to sacrifice their own money and time to preserve it. Or art preservation societies. You could even argue that patriotism is a type of gift-like because the United States of America or Canada or China or Germany or whatever it is, a country is not a thing, but you can like care about it and get a pleasure or like something good or a good feeling from sacrificing for the sake of that thing. It's a non-personal entity, but you're willing to sacrifice it to sacrifice something of yourself to protect it and fight for it. And so these are the ways, this is how gift, like, or love works. And so we'll come back to class and then I'll give you your exit ticket. And that's likes and loves. Bye.